I'm not a historian, but I have studied particular historical periods. And so the first period that I looked at historically was the 1860s. And so I did some research on the Homestead Act. And so it was a time where most of the United States lived on the East Coast and everything else was open land. Unfortunately, some of the land was taken from Indian tribes, but it was land at some point that became in the possession of the U.S. government. And so at first they were selling the land. And first they were saying, we're going to sell the land for, a dollar an acre. It wasn't being developed as much as they wanted, and also very wealthy people are the only people who could afford to do it. And so over time, they decided that we're going to do on Homestead Acts, we're going to give the land away in 160 acres. And all you have to commit to doing is staying on the land, developing it, planting crops, building communities. And for me, that was one of our most powerful social policies because rather than doing what was easy and what wealthy people wanted, they decided to provide opportunity for everybody. So, the third son who wasn't going to inherit everything could get on a wagon or their horse or whatever they had and go to Kansas or go to Oklahoma or go to whatever state was opening up and create a life for themselves. And so the middle half all the way to the west coast of the country was developed mostly through this Homestead Act. And so one point I often make is we need a modern Homestead Act. We need something that will give opportunities to families that are real opportunities that people can build and develop themselves as individuals or their communities, even if they don't start with the resources, but because they're given something like land or an education or money in the bank, they can make choices that they wouldn't have been make otherwise. So that's one example historically of policy that was important that at least I as a social worker use as I'm making cases for things that can happen today. I think the second time that social workers made a really big difference was the time of the New Deal. A lot of social workers were advising President Roosevelt at the time. And so I think, again, some of the innovative things that came through were things that social workers were trying on the ground in New York City and Chicago and different places. And they said, well, let's try this, for everybody. And so things like some of the work programs, some of the Social Security programs, some of the food assistant programs, those were ideas that bubbled up from things that social workers were doing and that were put in the ear of the president and eventually became policy. So I think that was another time where social workers historically actually made a big difference. And some of those things still exist today. They've been changed a little bit and the regulations are different, but I think those initial ideas came from social workers and are still making a difference in families' lives today.